June 3, 1944, Pacific Reconnaissance Base, Okinawa. The rain had stopped before dawn, leaving the runway glistening like a strip of dull glass. Steam rose from the metal wings of parked aircraft, turning the flight line into a mirage of ghosts. Men in grease-stained coveralls moved with the weary precision of those who had seen too many mornings like this. The air smelled of salt, oil, and exhaustion. It was the scent of war hanging heavy before the engines woke. Lieutenant Jacob Marlowe tightened his gloves and stared at the gray horizon. The world beyond it, an endless spread of ocean, hid enemy islands somewhere in its folds. He had been given simple orders: fly deep into hostile territory, photograph suspected airstrips, and return. No combat, no heroics, no improvisation. Just a recon run, clean and mechanical. Yet there was something in the air that morning, a charge he couldn't name, a silence that felt too rehearsed. It wasn't fear. It was intuition. The kind pilots learned to trust or die ignoring. Jake's F-6 Mustang, a reconnaissance variant of the famous P-51, sat waiting for him, sleek, restless, and armed not with guns but with twin Fairchild cameras. She was called Lucille, named after a girl back in Kansas, who still wrote letters on paper that smelled faintly of lavender. He hadn't opened the last one. It was folded in his flight jacket, a reminder of a world that still existed somewhere beyond the clouds. If you love stories like this, real courage, real history, then don't just watch, become part of it. Subscribe now to WWII Frontline Legends and stand with the people who keep this history alive. Every like, every share, every comment helps us honor those who lived these moments and shows your support for the hard work that goes into bringing these forgotten stories back to life. So hit that subscribe button, join our community, and tell us where you're watching from. Together, we're not just remembering history, we're keeping it alive. He walked a slow circle around the plane, running his hand along the wing's cool surface. Tiny bullet patches dotted the aluminum skin from his last mission. The mechanics called them luck marks. Jake called them memories. Each one meant he'd come home, barely. The briefing officer's voice echoed from the tent behind him, monotone and distant. Objective: photograph Naha Sector and Shuri Airfield. Altitude: 8,000 feet. Expected enemy presence: moderate. Jake had heard those same words 100 times, but the map on the table, smudged with fingerprints, told another story. There was movement across southern Okinawa. More patrols. More defenses. Something was coming. He felt it before anyone admitted it. He climbed into the cockpit. The metal seat was cold even through his flight suit. Switches flicked, gauges trembled alive, and the propeller began its furious spin. The Mustang coughed once, then roared. Ground crewmen ducked behind fuel drums as wind blasted across the tarmac. Jake closed the canopy. Inside the bubble, the world shrank to levers, dials, and breath. He throttled up, released the brakes, and Lucille rolled forward like a restless animal breaking leash. Moments later, Earth fell away beneath him. The sky opened, endless and blue. Below, the Pacific shimmered like molten glass. For a few minutes, the war was silent. Only the hum of the Merlin engine kept him tethered to reality. He followed his route northeast, scanning the coastlines through his viewfinder. Every few seconds, the camera clicked, a dry, mechanical heartbeat recording enemy secrets frame by frame. At 200 miles out, he found what he was looking for: a clearing carved between jungle ridges, streaked with tire marks, lined with camouflaged revetments. An airfield, active and hidden. He adjusted altitude, tilted the lens, and fired a burst of exposures. Perfect light. Perfect focus. Job done. He banked left, ready to turn home, then froze. A flash to his right. Another. Sunlight doesn't glint like that twice. Then the radio hissed with static, sputtered, and died. From the clouds ahead, shapes began to emerge, sleek, fast, and hungry. Japanese Zeros. 3, maybe 4. Climbing fast. Jake's pulse hammered. He had no guns, only cameras. No escort. No time. He dived, hugging the ocean's skin. Tracer rounds whipped through the air, red streaks ripping across the morning. The Mustang trembled under their fury. Water sprayed across the canopy as bullets tore into the sea around him. He banked hard, engines screaming, the G-forces crushing his chest. Instinct took over, training disappeared. One of the fighters overshot, its pilot underestimating the Mustang's dive speed. Jake pulled up sharply. The enemy passed beneath him, then vanished in a bloom of spray as its wing clipped the water. One down, though he hadn't meant to. Survival sometimes writes victory without asking permission. He looped higher, using the sun as cover. The second Zero followed, guns blazing. He rolled left, then right, the camera gear rattling violently in its mounts. If a bullet struck the film compartment, the mission would vanish. He felt sweat bead under his helmet, sting his eyes. Then a thought struck, crazy, suicidal. Use the enemy's aggression against them. He climbed, stalled briefly, then cut throttle. The Zero shot past him, unaware. Jake rammed the throttle forward again. The Mustang lurched, tail dropping, nose falling perfectly behind the enemy. He had no guns, but he had speed. He dived straight through the fighter's slipstream. The turbulence ripped at the fragile Japanese plane, flipping it into an uncontrolled spin. It hit the sea and disappeared. 2 kills, without a single bullet fired. Jake leveled off, gasping. The sky was empty now, but he knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. He checked his gauges, fuel steady, oil low, coolant flirting with danger. He turned toward home, scanning for shadows in the clouds. When Okinawa finally appeared on the horizon, it felt unreal, like waking from a nightmare mid-scream. He landed to stunned silence. Mechanics swarmed the aircraft, their eyes tracing the fresh holes along the fuselage. The squadron commander approached, expression unreadable. Film intact. Jake nodded. The man said nothing more. The war had no room for explanations that didn't fit on paper. That night, the base generator flickered as Jake developed his photographs inside the dim tent. The chemical smell filled the air. Trays of liquid glowed faintly red under the safe light. Each frame revealed pieces of the puzzle. Fuel trucks lined neatly along a runway, hangars half buried under palm fronds, a cluster of men hauling crates shaped suspiciously like wing sections. Then came the final image, blurred, tilted, and strange. In the corner of the photo, a long hangar stood apart from the rest. Its roof was reinforced, its doors sealed. Even through distortion, Jake could tell this wasn't an ordinary building. Something important was being hidden there. He dried the print, pinned it to the wall, and stared until the generator coughed and died. The red light vanished. Darkness swallowed the tent. Outside, the Pacific winds whispered through the palm leaves. He could almost hear the echo of his cameras still clicking. In his mind replayed the dogfight, the shimmer of sunlight, the shadow of wings, the way the Zero had broken apart in the air. He told himself it was luck. He didn't yet know it was the beginning of something much larger. If you're watching this right now on WWII Frontline Legends, take a second to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from around the world. From Texas to London, from Sydney to Manila, our community keeps these forgotten stories alive. Drop your location in the comments below and join us in keeping their courage remembered. The next morning, new orders awaited him. Same route, same target, but there was an added note scribbled in pencil. Maintain altitude, avoid engagement. Jake almost laughed. Avoiding engagement was becoming impossible. He cleaned the canopy glass, loaded new film, and rolled Lucille back toward the runway. The mechanics watched him go with quiet respect. They had seen bullet holes patched overnight. They knew he was flying on borrowed luck. As the Mustang climbed once more into the early light, the world below unfolded in fragments. Blue ocean, green jungle, smoke spirals from distant gunfire. He followed the coastline, recognizing landmarks from yesterday's photos. But something had changed. The air felt different, tense, as though the island itself were holding a secret. He spotted movement near the same hangar complex. A new set of markings on the ground, fresh tracks leading into the jungle. Then came a flash. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from below. He banked, snapped photos while the sky tore open with explosions. Each click of the shutter was defiance. Each roll of film, proof. When the barrage finally ceased, he was already miles away, the coastline shrinking behind him. He glanced back once. Black smoke rose where the hangar had stood, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw something. An aircraft shape unlike any he'd ever encountered, half-built, half-destroyed, and vanishing in the haze. He landed hours later, fuel nearly gone, hands trembling from adrenaline. He knew this mission would never make it into official reports. Recon missions rarely did. But inside his heart, something irreversible had shifted. He had faced death armed only with curiosity and willpower, and somehow survived. The camera had become his gun, the film his ammunition. And the enemy he had photographed would soon realize that sometimes the most dangerous man in the sky isn't the one with bullets, but the one who sees everything. Night fell over Okinawa again. Engines cooled. Men slept where they could. Jake sat alone by his Mustang, listening to the metal tick as it cooled in the dark. Somewhere beyond those waves were 40 more battles waiting for him, though he didn't know it yet. All he knew was that tomorrow he would fly again, and this time he would not just take photos. He would change the course of missions none of his commanders would ever admit existed. The horizon glowed faintly, promising another dawn and another lie. The orders still said reconnaissance only. But Jake had already crossed the line. He had looked death in the eye through a camera lens and refused to blink. The war had many fronts, some written in history, others buried under classified ink. And one of them had just begun at 30,000 feet over the Pacific. The sky had begun to change. In early June, the Pacific sun burned white-hot across Okinawa's airfields, baking the asphalt until even the horizon shimmered. Each day the missions were the same on paper. Reconnaissance flights, long-distance photography, no confirmed engagements. But inside the barracks, whispers began to circulate. Unmarked crates arriving from the mainland, briefings that ended in silence, new maintenance orders for the Mustangs that officially weren't supposed to carry guns. Something was shifting beneath the surface, invisible but undeniable. Lieutenant Jacob Marlowe could feel it every time he strapped himself into Lucille. The aircraft seemed heavier now, hungrier, as if the metal itself knew more than the men who flew her. The engineers had started modifying the planes, subtle adjustments that no one talked about. Empty mounts where cameras had been replaced with hidden armaments. A secondary switch panel covered in tape. Nobody dared to ask why. Orders came, missions launched, and pilots returned with faces pale as frost. By the end of June, Jake's unit had logged nearly 40 sorties, most returning with film rolls blurred by turbulence and gunfire. Gunfire that wasn't supposed to exist. The commanding officer, a man with tired eyes and a chest full of ribbons, summoned Jake to the command tent one evening. The moment he stepped inside, he saw the truth pinned to the walls. Maps littered with red circles, each marking confirmed aerial kills. None attributed to official fighter squadrons. All labeled under the same call sign, Recon 3B. His squadron. The officer didn't speak much. He didn't need to. The silence was confession enough. The reconnaissance wing wasn't reconnaissance anymore. It was an experiment, an unofficial hybrid, part intelligence, part offensive strike, designed to operate without public acknowledgement. The orders to take photos had been a cover from the beginning. Their real mission was to find, engage, and destroy enemy aircraft before they ever reached Allied bombers. And Jake, through instinct or fate, had become their most effective weapon. He left the tent in a daze, the ocean wind cold against his skin. Somewhere between duty and betrayal, something inside him hardened. If this was the game they were playing, he would play to win, but he would do it on his own terms. From that night forward, every mission was different. He no longer photographed from a distance. He hunted. The first few kills came fast, strafing runs on isolated patrol planes, ambushes over jungle-covered airstrips. Each victory carried both exhilaration and guilt, an unspoken debt to the ghosts who fell through clouds. Jake started keeping track, not on paper but on Lucille's fuselage, tiny marks scratched beneath the cockpit frame. By mid-July there were 12. By August, 27. Yet even as his legend spread quietly across the base, the mystery of that strange hangar from his photographs gnawed at him. The shape he had seen in that final frame, the one blurred by smoke, still haunted his thoughts. Some nights he dreamt of it. A monstrous silhouette rising through fog, wings curved unlike any aircraft he'd ever known. He would wake drenched in sweat, heart pounding, the sound of a shudder echoing in his ears. One evening, while reviewing newly developed film, Jake found something chilling. A reconnaissance roll from another pilot's mission showed the same airfield, but now the mysterious hangar was gone. In its place, burned wreckage, and next to it, a convoy of trucks carrying covered crates toward the coast. Whatever had been there had been moved, hidden again, or worse, activate. The next day, he volunteered for a deep reconnaissance sweep beyond the authorized zone. Officially, he was mapping weather conditions. Unofficially, he was chasing shadows. He flew low over the ocean, following the faint trails of supply barges. Hours passed. Then he saw it, an island not listed on any map, ringed by coral and camouflaged nets. At its center stood a single concrete strip, flanked by radar towers. And there, gleaming under camouflage netting, was the shape from his nightmares, the experimental aircraft. It was larger than any Japanese design he knew. Twin engines, swept wings, a massive undercarriage built for heavy loads. This was no fighter. It was a weapon platform. A bomber prototype, perhaps capable of striking American fleets from distances thought impossible. Jake's stomach clenched. If this thing went operational, thousands would die. He circled once, snapping photographs. The island's anti-aircraft guns opened fire instantly. Black bursts tore through the clouds. His canopy shook. He took one last shot, then banked hard, diving toward the ocean's surface. Tracers cut through the air like red lightning. The water erupted behind him. One shell grazed his left wing, ripping away a section of metal. Smoke filled the cockpit. He coughed, leveled out, and throttled full power. The Mustang screamed back toward open sea, leaving chaos behind. Back at base, his film told the story he couldn't put into words. Command studied the images in silence. No one spoke the word bomber, but everyone knew. Within hours, new orders arrived. Reconnaissance to continue. No direct engagement. Maintain operational secrecy. Jake stared at the paper until the ink blurred. Maintain secrecy. As if pretending the monster didn't exist would make it disappear. Over the following weeks, tension on the base became unbearable. Pilots whispered about intercepted transmissions, about Japanese engineers working on long-range payloads that could reach the Philippines. The phrase revenge weapon spread through the ranks. Jake stopped sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that shape again, the prototype gleaming in the sun, waiting to rise. Then one dawn, the radio crackled to life mid-flight. The message was brief. Enemy formation detected north of Okinawa. Engage only if necessary. Jake smiled bitterly. If necessary had lost its meaning long ago. He banked toward the coordinates, the ocean stretching endlessly below. The first sight of the formation made his breath catch. Dozens of fighters escorting two large bombers, possibly test models of the same weapon he'd photographed. The escorts spotted him instantly. The dogfight that followed was chaos. The Mustang rolled, climbed, and dove in arcs of violence. Jake moved like a man possessed. He used clouds as cover, baiting the enemy into turns they couldn't recover from. One after another, planes fell flaming into the sea. The air was alive with fire and smoke. His ammunition gauges flickered empty. Still he flew, forcing collisions, using turbulence to send enemies into spirals. By the time his fuel warning light came on, the sky was clear. He had destroyed 8 in that single sortie. When he limped back to base, Lucille was more whole than plain. But she lived. So did he. The mission report went classified. The victory count recorded under unconfirmed. But everyone on the airfield saw the wreckage streaked across his fuselage and knew the truth. The man sent to take photos had become death from the clouds. That night, Jake sat by the edge of the runway, watching another squadron take off into the amber dusk. Their engines rumbled low across the ocean, fading into the horizon. The setting sun painted the clouds blood red. In that light, he thought of Kansas, of lavender letters unopened, of orders that never told the whole truth. For the first time, he felt the weight of his actions settle over him. 40 aircraft destroyed, each one carrying men who, like him, probably just wanted to go home. The war had twisted all of them into something unrecognizable. The line between photographer and killer had blurred beyond return. But fate wasn't finished with Jake Marlowe. In the days that followed, reconnaissance flights reported strange radio signals coming from the same island where the prototype had been sighted. Analysts dismissed them as static. Jake wasn't so sure. The frequencies repeated at precise intervals, like a countdown. He sent a request for another mission. It was denied. Twice. Then, without authorization, he flew anyway. He reached the island under heavy cloud cover. Anti-aircraft guns waited, silent but ready. On the runway below, the prototype bomber sat fueled, engines running. Jake dove through the clouds. Tracer fire erupted, but he didn't pull up. He aimed straight for the hangar, dropping low enough to skim treetops. His remaining ammunition tore through the bomber's wings. Flames erupted. The entire airfield exploded in a chain reaction that shook the sea. He pulled up hard, blinded by smoke and debris, radio crackling with static. Then nothing. The horizon vanished. The world went black. For 3 days he was missing. Search teams found only fragments, twisted metal, bits of film canisters, pieces of canopy glass. Then, on the 4th day, Lucille limped home on half an engine. Jake climbed out, face streaked with soot, eyes hollow and distant. He said nothing. The officers said nothing back. Whatever he had destroyed, whatever truth he had uncovered, would be buried beneath classification seals for decades. That night, as rain returned to Okinawa, Jake stood alone on the runway. The storm reflected in the puddles beneath the wings of his Mustang. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. He wondered whether it was the sky grieving or applauding. The next morning, his orders were waiting. Recon mission. Standard route. Take photos. He smiled faintly. The words had lost all meaning. The war would remember him as a ghost pilot, the man who flew to take pictures and came back with legends. But the secret he carried, the real one, was still out there, buried under ocean waves and sealed files, waiting for someone brave enough to ask the question no one dared to write. What exactly had he destroyed that day? Dawn returned to Okinawa 3 days after the explosion. The rain had washed the airfield clean, but the scent of burnt oil still lingered, a memory that refused to fade. Engines coughed awake one by one, carrying other men toward other battles. Life in war never paused, even when legends disappeared into clouds. Lieutenant Jacob Marlowe sat alone beside Lucille, her skin patched with rough welding and paint that no longer matched. She was alive, but barely, a survivor like him. The mechanics had done their best, sealing bullet holes and oil leaks, but the scars ran deeper than aluminum. Inside the cockpit, a faint trace of smoke still clung to the dials. Every switch he touched reminded him of the island, the fire, and the sound of metal screaming underwater. The official report listed the operation as reconnaissance mission, successful data retrieval. No mention of the experimental bomber. No mention of enemy casualties. No mention of how one man, flying half-blind, had stopped a weapon that could have changed the course of the Pacific Washington. R. Command locked the film rolls away in a steel cabinet marked confidential. Do not copy. Jake wasn't even allowed to see his own photographs again. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, saluted, and walked out into the sunlight. But inside, the silence roared. Weeks passed. The war thundered on across the Pacific, Saipan, Tinian, the Marianas. Reports of new Japanese aircraft dwindled, and pilots whispered that some secret project had been halted after an explosion off the southern coast. No one connected the dots. No one said the name Jacob Marlowe aloud. Yet among the ground crews and gunners, stories began to grow about the Recon pilot who took photos with one hand and shot down 40 planes with the other. Some said he'd been trained by the OSS. Others swore he was half-mad, driven by something no normal man could endure. Jake never confirmed nor denied any of it. He spent his days testing repaired aircraft and his nights staring at the sea. Sometimes he'd walk down to the edge of the runway after midnight, watching lightning dance far out over the ocean, and wonder if the secret bomber still lay somewhere below, twisted and sleeping beneath the waves. The base photographers still developed reconnaissance film each morning, trays of chemicals glowing under red light. Every now and then, Jake would step inside and watch the images appear on paper: hangars, trucks, distant islands. Always he looked for one thing: that strange curved wing. He never saw it again. By late summer, orders came for him to rotate home. His service record was spotless, his missions exemplary. Yet nowhere in the paperwork did the number 40 appear. Officially, he had 0 kills. Unofficially, he was the most effective pilot on Okinawa. When he boarded the transport plane bound for Pearl Harbor, no ceremony followed. Only a few mechanics stood by the tarmac, caps in hand. Lucille remained behind, grounded, her propeller bent, her cameras removed. She would be stripped for parts before year's end. From the air, Okinawa shrank into a dot of green fading into endless blue. Jake leaned back against the seat and closed his eyes. The hum of the engines blended with the rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel tired. Truly tired. He dreamed of the first morning he took off, the steam on the runway, the smell of salt, the click of the camera shutter. He saw again the faces of the enemy pilots he had never met but somehow knew. Young men like himself, chasing orders into oblivion. War had taken them all and turned them into ghosts with wings. When he reached San Francisco, reporters were waiting on the docks, cameras flashing. None of them knew his name. They shouted for the returning heroes of the 5th Fighter Group, not for the quiet man who slipped past them unnoticed. Jake walked through the crowd, duffel over his shoulder, eyes hidden beneath the brim of his cap. The noise of home felt foreign. The war might have been half a world away, but it was still inside him, etched deep where no peace could reach. In the following years, the world changed faster than anyone imagined. The atomic bomb fell, and the war ended. Files were opened, medals distributed, and heroes written into textbooks. Jake Marlowe's missions remained buried, filed under numbers no historian could access. His story became rumor, then legend, then almost nothing at all. Yet in 1957, a classified debrief was quietly declassified by mistake. Inside was a single paragraph referencing reconnaissance pilot jam, significant role in prevention of experimental strike aircraft deployment. The line was quickly resealed, but not before a copy was made. Historians later found it, puzzled by the initials. They never learned the rest. By then, Jake had long since disappeared from public life. Some said he became a crop duster in Kansas. Others believed he joined a photo agency in California, shooting landscapes instead of targets. A few claimed he never stopped flying, that he vanished one stormy night somewhere over the Pacific, returning to the only sky that ever understood him. Whatever the truth, fragments of his past remained. In a museum archive decades later, a rusted camera was catalogued without origin. Serial number partially filed off, lens cracked, inside still containing an undeveloped roll of film. The tag read, "Recovered, Okinawa Base Storage 1945. No one ever processed it. Some say the images were too damaged. Others whisper that the negatives still show something the world isn't ready to see. The silhouette of a bomber that never officially existed. As historians debate, one thing remains certain. Without Jacob Marlowe's disobedience, countless lives may have been lost. The man sent only to take photos had seen the war through a different lens, one that captured not glory, but consequence. In the years that followed, veterans who had served with him spoke softly of his calm, his silence, his distance. He never bragged, one mechanic recalled. He just looked at the sky like it was an old friend that betrayed him. Today, when researchers sift through yellowed records, his name appears only in margins, penciled notes beside flight numbers long erased by time. But his story lives on wherever courage and conscience collide in the fog of war. Because somewhere, beyond all the medals and monuments, there are men who fought battles that no one will ever record. Men who obeyed orders but listened to their hearts instead. Men like Lieutenant Jacob Marlowe, the ghost with a camera, the hunter who never asked to hunt, the man who flew into history without leaving a trace. And now, decades later, the question still hangs in the air. What did he truly destroy on that island? Was it just a prototype, or the beginning of a weapon history wasn't ready to acknowledge? The answers may lie buried under coral and silt, but the legend refuses to die. The old hangar remains, half submerged on satellite photos, visible only when tides are low. Pilots flying near the area still report radio interference, strange echoes, bursts of static that vanish when they circle back. Some say it's just the atmosphere. Others think the island still remembers. Either way, the story of Jacob Marlowe isn't just about one man. It's about the choices that define every soldier, to follow orders, or to follow what's right, to photograph the world, or to change it. The film may have stopped rolling, but the frames he captured live on, invisible, eternal, stitched between the pages of history where truth meets myth. And maybe that's how it should be. Because heroes like Jake never asked to be remembered. They just hoped someone somewhere would understand what it cost them to be forgotten. If stories like this move you, if they remind you that courage can exist in silence, please take a moment to share, like, and subscribe to WWII Frontline Legends. It helps keep these hidden pieces of history alive for new generations who deserve to know them. Tell us where you're watching from around the world. I read every comment myself. Are you in Texas? London? Manila? Sydney? Let's see how far this story can travel. Because together, we're not just remembering history. We're keeping the spirit of these legends alive.